Air Transat Airlines Flight 236 was going from Toronto to Lisbon. It was nighttime, and the plane was flying at 39,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. This kind of situation is common for pilots, and there wasn't anything unusual. However, something inside the plane was about to change everything soon. Even from 39,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the ground can't be seen. Suddenly, the captain realized the plane's fuel was running out. This was a very frightening situation for the two pilots because running out of fuel over the Atlantic Ocean means only one thing: death. Welcome back once again to Docutainment's videos. This incident took place on August 23, 2001. An Airbus A330 from Air Transat Airlines was getting ready at Toronto Pearson Airport for a flight to Lisbon. The flight was supposed to last 7 hours, so they loaded 48 metric tons of fuel. Boarding started at 9:00 p.m. local time. On board Flight 236, there were 293 passengers and 13 crew members, including the two pilots. Captain Robert, who was 48 years old, had 16,000 hours of flight experience. First Officer Dirk, 28 years old, had 5,000 hours of experience, including 400 hours flying the same Airbus A330 aircraft. The airplane itself was a modern Airbus A330, only 2 years old. Both the crew and the airplane seemed ready for the trip. After all the checks were done, the pilots taxied Flight 236 to the runway, and with permission from the Air Traffic Control, ATC, took off. After getting airborne, they headed towards Lisbon, flying at 39,000 feet. On long flights like this, pilots have less work to do because the autopilot system handles most tasks. Their main jobs include keeping an eye on things and telling the control tower where they are. After 4 hours of smooth flying, things changed. While over the Atlantic Ocean, in the middle of the night, an unusual reading appeared for engine number 2, the right engine. This reading showed high oil pressure, which means low oil quantity and temperature. This was an error the pilots had never seen before. Looking in the flight manual didn't help. The pilots reached out to Air Transat's maintenance unit in Canada, but they didn't know the solution either. The pilots suspected a faulty sensor was causing wrong readings. Around 30 minutes later, another message appeared, but this time about fuel. The airplane's wings had uneven fuel levels. The right wing had less fuel than the left. While this might not usually be a big deal, the situation became serious. The pilots quickly tried to fix the issue by moving fuel from the left wing to the right. However, just 10 minutes later, the captain received a low fuel warning again. The fuel in the right wing had gone down once more. Even if they combined the fuel from both wings, there still wasn't enough to reach Lisbon. This was a critical moment. The plane's options in the vast ocean were limited, with only one place to land: the Azores Islands. The pilots talked to Santa Maria ATC, telling them about the fuel shortage and their plan to land at Terceira Airport on the Azores Islands. But doubts remained. With around 7 tons of fuel left, they only had about 25 minutes left in the air. The situation was serious, and landing in the ocean seemed possible. As they kept talking to maintenance and ATC, the maintenance unit suggested going down to 20,000 feet to confirm the fuel leak. The captain said no because they thought it would be hard to go back up. Their best choice was to glide at their current altitude of 39,000 feet. In a few minutes, things got worse. A fire started in the right engine, causing panic among the passengers. The airplane now had about 4.5 tons of fuel left and only one engine. They couldn't keep flying with just one engine, so they started descending gradually. Emergency preparations were made at Terceira Airport. Fire trucks and emergency teams got ready for any situation. The airplane was still about 240 kilometers away from the airport, and they had only 600 kilograms of fuel left. Then the feared thing happened. The left engine caught fire due to its high thrust. Now Flight 236 was gliding over the Atlantic Ocean without engines. The captain's decision not to lower the airplane to 20,000 feet turned out to be right. Because both engines shut down, the plane went dark inside because the engines powered the electricity. Luckily, the airplane had a backup system that generated electricity from the airspeed. It was enough for the cockpit's important equipment. Terceira Airport was 120 kilometers away, and the plane had descended to 30,000 feet. The captain had to glide this distance. The passengers were in darkness, and silence filled the cabin. It was a tense atmosphere. Everyone knew the worst-case scenario was landing in the ocean. The crew started preparing passengers for a possible water landing. Landing in water is very dangerous. Even if people survive the impact, they could drown or die from the cold water. Normally, gliding in a passenger plane without engines is difficult. The plane's pitch control was crucial, and the pilot was using the stick to control it manually. The altitude was dropping at a rate of 2,000 feet per minute. In the next 15 minutes, the plane would either reach the airport or end up in the ocean. When the plane was 15 kilometers from Terceira Airport, its altitude was 13,000 feet. Normally, it should be around 3,000 feet at that distance. Lowering the altitude quickly might lead to a crash. So the pilot decided to do a 360 degrees turn. After the turn, the distance to the airport stayed the same, but the altitude dropped to 5,000 feet. This altitude was still high, but not high enough for another 360 degrees turn. So the pilot lined up the plane with the runway and did a series of S-turns. This helped the plane cover more distance from the runway and gave them more time to lower the altitude. In normal landings, flaps are extended for drag and engines are powered up, making the plane's nose lift. But Flight 236 didn't have engine thrust. This landing was different and risky. The pilot had one chance to land the plane. Make it or break it. Finally, the plane landed on the runway with a strong jolt. 8 out of 12 tires burst. It was tough to stop the plane, but it eventually came to a halt while skidding. The airport crew quickly controlled a fire in the landing gear. Flight 236 was the first and only passenger plane in history to glide for so long without engines. The investigation showed that a part from another plane was mistakenly put into the right engine before takeoff. This caused a fuel leak due to vibrations. Airbus installed a new system to detect fuel leaks during flights after this incident. A year later, Captain Robert and First Officer Dirk were honored for their skillful landing with the Superior Airmanship Award. We hope you enjoy and share this Docutainment video. Thank you for your kind comments. See you in the next exciting video.